Hey, we're introducing a new program this week, right here in the Funnel Radio Network. Predictable Revenue Radio, hosted by Patrick Morrissey. Predictable Revenue Radio is brought to you by Altify, the sales transformation company. Patrick's the Chief Marketing Officer at Altify, responsible for all aspects of marketing, as well as channels and alliances. Prior to joining Altify, he was CRO of Simpler, and he has held multiple executive positions in sales and marketing at Salesforce, DataSift, Savion, and Business Objects. At Predictable Revenue Radio, we believe the only way to unlock sustained growth is to deliver predictable revenue by delivering insights, thought leadership, and best practices on how to improve your sales velocity. Predictable Revenue Radio will talk to the top B2B sales leaders, sales ops, enablement, and marketing execs to help you crack the code to high-performance selling. So with all that said, let's launch this new program right here on the Funnel Radio Network for at-work listeners like you. Welcome, Patrick.
Welcome to another edition of Predictable Revenue Radio. I'm Pat Morrissey, I'm your host, and I'm pleased to be welcomed Matt Singer. And Matt is actually an expert in the topic we're going to get into, which is talking about how do you enable salespeople in a time of massive transformations. And in this case, in the particular transformation we're talking about is the journey that CenturyLink is on as they're continuing to grow market and grow customers and trying to enable their sales team. So Matt is the Senior Director of Sales Enablement at CenturyLink. Matt, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background and, kind of set the table of where you've come from that leads to the current conversation.
Yeah, I have a varied history. I've worked in a lot of industries. I've been in telecommunications now for 11 years. I started at Level 3 Communications, and Level 3 went through numerous acquisitions. My tenure, CenturyLink recently purchased Level 3, and I was one of the leaders on the integration team for the sales organization. I run the sales enablement, sales effectiveness function for Level 3, and now CenturyLink going on 4 years, having led the integration of the sales organization for the two companies. Now I have about 18 months of integration, this company, and now going forward, looking at purely how do we continue and finish the integration and enable the sales organization, 2,000-person sales organization, be highly productive in an environment with really significant complexity.
Complexity probably is putting it mildly, because if you're not an expert in telecom, you might not know the scope and scale of what we're talking about. But give a little context of what you were doing, before the integration to CenturyLink and that activity happened at Level 3.
Yeah, I often say that our number one challenge is the fact that we are in an M&A situation about every 2 or 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Level 3 was buying a company roughly every 2 or 3 years. We never stop and optimize. We're in nonstop integration mode because transitioning products into an end state CPQ system or contract lifecycle or ordering, getting all your data clean and in a Salesforce platform or whatever your CRM. CenturyLink shared that same common history, also in a repeating cycle of acquisitions. So we find ourselves both bringing our complexity together, which I have referred to as we're just having compound complexity. We have sales organization now. It's a unified organization, so we have a single hierarchy, but we have salespeople still working in both legacy company streams. It takes many years to integrate into a single operating platform process.
Well, and you commented on trying to make this work for 2,000 salespeople, and as one of the integration leaders, that means by definition you own the problem. But give us a little context for the scope and scale of CenturyLink, the business, because a lot of people aren't going to be familiar with really what you're dealing with here.
CenturyLink is a global telecommunications provider. We're the number 2 enterprise telecommunication provider in North America, as well as one of the largest carriers of internet traffic in the world. So we have a worldwide fiber optic network, and then we have metro network in many, many cities throughout the world. So we provide data, voice services, internet access, security services unified communications. So we have a very broad portfolio of services that we offer to businesses. And with the combination of Level 3 and CenturyLink, we also have a consumer service as well, where we offer home, internet, and voice services to consumers.
So when you think about trying to bring two big companies together, and actually I heard you refer to it when we were talking in the run-up to the show, this is really compound transformation, because that whole telecom market is evolving very, very rapidly and consolidating very, very rapidly. And it sounds like you guys are on the front end of that. It's better to be the consolidator than getting consolidated. But what does that mean in terms of what the sales leadership looks to you and looks to the team in terms of enabling sales?
Sure. This past transaction or integration process, I think, was really successful because we had such great sales leadership. So our leadership team has to make just a never-ending sequence of really critical decisions about how are we going to operate as a company. And this is informed by many different aspects of our integration team, third-party consultants, et cetera. But for example, the landing point when you're going to launch a new sales organization is you have to have the work structure in place. So there's countless organizational decisions to make. You have to have your customer segmented properly, and then a sales channel designed to serve those segments of your customer base. You have to design a compensation plan that rewards the type of action that you want. So if you're in a market capture mode or revenue retention mode, or grow your base or grow net new logos, you have to design your compensation plan with a sales component, a revenue component. So you've got complexity with your comp plan design, you name it. So there's quite a bit of complexity there. So that leadership and decisive leadership, I think, is one of the most important elements of any solving for transformational complexity in the sales org, is that decisive leadership is essential. And that's what we've, I think, done really well in our integration.
So when you think about this transformation, and to your point, being in telecom for a while, you've seen this film before. Where does this thing go sideways generally beyond the leadership piece? Say you want good leadership and clarity of vision, but you go from one day trying to enable a team across a broad geography for one set of products and services, and suddenly you've got maybe an order of magnitude more variables to deal with, and you're on short time scales. When you think about having lived through multiple integrations and consolidations before, where are the scars?
And I can relate this to both my healthcare experience. I spent about 6.5 years in healthcare prior to my tenure at Level 3. So this is really not industry specific, but what I've seen in past M&As is when you bring in leadership that has one leader from one legacy company, one leader from the other legacy company, and say, share responsibility and try to make these important decisions in a very timely manner. When you've got two people with a 50-50 vote, it really, really slows things down. It's hard to get to the clarity and decisiveness that you need to move fast. The longer you prolong launching your new sales organization, you're just lengthening the lack of productivity, because the fear and uncertainty is the biggest enemy to a productive salesperson. They don't want to invest in accounts they're not sure they're going to keep.
Totally.
And so that one element of having leaders try to co-decide when they're both bringing a lot of their history and what their paradigm is, that's a real difficulty in an integration.
Well, I got to believe that raises a whole list of issues around the customer side of this equation too, from what do I have to who do I work with joint customers, or how do you even think about putting a plan together to map out territories? What's good look like in that, or what are the considerations to start to think about when you're putting a box around bringing two large organizations together and then aligning salespeople to go execute?
So one of the guiding principles that we had was to limit the amount of disruption for assignment of account rep to a customer. That's the number one way to disrupt your relationship with the customer during an M&A activity, is to change their account rep. Now, in our case, we had numerous accounts that had two reps assigned to them. So you still have to make some decisions around who's going to be retained. But I'll kind of circle back to your segmentation of your customer base is the first critical part. So in our case, in CenturyLink, hundreds of thousands of accounts, sensibly segmenting your customer base and then designing a sales channel to serve that customer base. What kind of a customer experience you want, how are you going to go to market, what's your sales coverage going to be? How many accounts you're going to sign per rep? All of those considerations are essential to having a good strategy for serving each segment of the customer base. Again, we use a third party to help get through all the data, crunch the data. What's the overlap? What's the resulting sales channel size going to be? What's the total dollar value existing? What's the opportunity? And then you just start to do the math to split it up. And then it kind of spits out, here's the size of my customer, my sales organization I need to have with a reasonable average number of accounts per rep, things like that. There's a lot of data crunching to get there, but that's a super essential part, because to get a salesperson productive, you've got to know who you're reporting to, what customers are you selling to, what are you selling, and how do you get paid. Getting them that clarity, and they're off and running.
And certainly that third bucket of what are you selling, and particularly when you're trying to bring two product portfolios together, is not an insubstantial challenge. And you talk about ongoing integration. How do you fight through and prioritize that? And what's required from a sales enablement perspective to actually make it stick with the sales teams?
We considered change management to be an essential part of helping the sales organization get through a transition. And again, we experienced this in prior industries. It's not necessarily telecom specific. And what I mean by change management is a great communication plan. Salespeople, especially during times of dramatic change, they'll engage more than ever. They want to participate in these all hands calls, these broadcast communications to share what's going on. So we did that up frequently, and we made sure to have our figureheads participate in those calls. Then creating a intranet site for the common integration related news and artifacts and documents. So when they need to get to what's the new policy, what's the new comp plan, what's the new whatever it is, we architected the intranet site to make sure we share that content. And then we quickly stood up a change management board, allowed a stakeholder group to weigh in. So when proposed changes were coming about, we'd have a broad stakeholder group who could comment, and then we could discuss what's the appropriate way to communicate out those changes.
And when you say stakeholder group, is that cross-functional, or you're taking reps from different geographies to have a seat at the table, or what's the mix of who makes some of those calls? Because there's a balance between everyone's got an opinion versus you've got a short time scale to try to bring two organizations together.
Yeah. I jokingly say there are those who have an opinion and those who have a vote. And our stakeholder board really consists of sales ops, offer management, legal, perhaps, operations, project management, our delivery functions. Since we have so many channels, we may have representatives from each channel weigh in. So it's a pretty good broad group, and we kind of say you got to show up to cast your vote. So participation is great in that change review board.
Well, that also suggests, too, if you don't show up, you don't get a vote.
That's exactly right.
So the train keeps moving. Last time I checked, you guys are a publicly traded entity with shareholders and expectations.
Absolutely are.
What does that mean then when you bring it down to the street level or the rep level? Because behind all that, there are process definitions, there are tool sets, there are a whole bunch of people in direct and related functions that are trying to support the team. I mean, sales enablement is a big, wide thing, and you don't own all those people. How do you start to rationalize the other pieces of this puzzle to, again, get to the four big buckets of clarity that are going to drive the right kind of salesperson behavior?
Great question. I didn't mention training in my change management, but I should have. Training is an obvious, essential element to helping educate people into there are new products to sell, there's a new set of tools from which to sell those products and quote and price, etc. There's a new selling process, methodology. So we were upfront and we confronted the differences between the two legacy company ways of doing business. We enabled a thorough, thoughtful training program, knowing that there's only so much a rep can consume. So you have to be very calculated in how much you're going to expose them to. And then the types of training, system-based training, for example, learning a new CPQ system. It's a really difficult thing to do remotely with a large audience.
Right.
The engagement level, it's just human nature. It's hard to engage. System-based training is a tough one. We have these labs, quoting labs, where we bring people in. They are opt-in, so it's not prescribed training, but the lab is a working session to get people hands-on and to use the system. So sitting there having to listen to a point-and-click demonstration isn't remotely close as effective as a lab where you're actually going to do while an instructor talks a large group or a modest-sized group through the process.
Well, and are they talking them through the process tell me how this works in real life? Because there's one thing about, I need to know what the CPQ system is going to be, regardless of where I come from and the legacy company that I was in. There's another thing when I've got active deals on the table, right? Because business doesn't stop and people still have quotas to meet and expectations to meet and customers to satisfy. How do you bring that piece of the puzzle together? Or do you do those groups in real time around real opportunities? And
also a great question. What we stood up, which I would consider another best practice, is we call it the Sales Success Center. It's an internal support desk that is on demand, available via chat, a ticket, or a phone call. We expand the group for a purpose of an integration because we know we're going to be introducing a dramatically larger amount of change. So that live deal support is critical. So if they simply run into a how-to question or a technical issue, or they need somebody to just walk them through, how do I do it this? Why do I do it this way? That Sales Success Center is the group that does that. So I staff that from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I've got a group on a shift that 6 hours at a time. There's only so much you can answer questions from grumpy salespeople. But it's an extremely successful function that helps bridge the gap until reps become proficient in the go-forward way of doing business.
Yeah, and when you get them to the go-forward, particularly when you're talking about global footprint and strategic accounts, then what does good look like, or what are the kind of behaviors that you're looking for from a sales enablement perspective to say, hey, yeah, they're getting it. We're making progress.
Well,
because certainly there's revenue, right? You either made the number, you didn't make the number, you closed the deal, but that's not the only element here.
And we, of course, look at the traditional measures of success, like quota attainment and win rates and yield, or the percentage of reps who make a quota. I look at the data frequently on how many tickets, chats, calls are coming into the Sales Success Center. What are the top issues that we're seeing as trends? And then we're in a ticket prevention mode. We don't want them to have to call. Right. So we engage our training organization, we engage IT, we'll engage whoever the fix agent is for the respective top reasons. And so sometimes it's just, we did a new product release and now we have a lot of questions because it's just a natural adoption rate of a new product. But by looking at the data and looking at the reports, we have like the fastest pulse on what the challenges of the challenges du jour are for our sales organization.
And so when you think about the go forward then, so you've gotten through phase one of the integration, but back to where you started, this sounds like in telecom, or certainly in CenturyLink today, it's an ongoing series of integrations and things that you're trying to rationalize from acquisitions on both sides of the house. So when you look over the time horizon for the next couple of years, what's top of mind for you, and what would be top of mind for other people, who might be in a similar situation where they're trying to bring, two companies together in an M&A situation?
Simplicity and sales productivity are the resounding themes. So how can we make a seller's job easier, whether it be their interaction with the customer? What are some of their challenges with maybe learning the new products and the pitch, or is it the content that enables the pitch? Is it too much pricing, bureaucracy, whatever it may be? So we're very sensitive to those productivity drains that affect the seller. We want to get to quickly an end state of, here are the products you should sell, here's what's going to make you most successful, here's what the market wants. We have a huge investment in our systems and our process optimization. So being really in tune with what the challenges are and enabling them to be as productive as possible, that's just kind of the drumbeat that we live by. It's a different set of problems depending on where you are and what the type of transformation you're going through. So there's not one prescription of just do this. In our case, we have a multi-year effort to collapse into one CPQ system and one CLM system and simplify the process. So it's going to be inefficient for a while, but that's the nature of telecom. We all experience this type of inefficiency because of the nature of consolidation going on in our market.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like that's going to slow down anytime soon. So no sense holding your breath and wishing it gets better, right?
Yeah.
So if you step back and think about this and other of these cycles that you've lived through, and you talked about the importance of sales leadership, what are the other 2 or 3 things that would be top of mind that people from a sales leadership or a sales enablement leadership like you are thinking about or should be thinking about and coming back to as the core checklist to get through a tough time in a short cycle and really arm the team to succeed?
When you think about how do we make a sales organization operate better, it's easy to jump to technology being the solution,
right?
But you've got to think about
wait. We're at Dreamforce this week. Are you telling me technology and some of the cloud is not the solution?
It's part of the solution.
Okay, fair enough.
People and the process, and then your systems or your technology. I mean, I own a big portfolio of tools, so believe me, I'm an advocate for the right tools for the job, and automation and simplicity can certainly come from that. But how you hire, how you train, how you reward and incent, and how you manage your people, that is the foundation. You got to do that right. You got to have a sensible process. You got to have a process that helps them be successful in selling what you believe the marketplace needs the most. Process is essential. You cannot have great technology that overcomes a process that just is incomprehensible and tough to follow.
Yep.
And then frosting is a technology. Technology can create consistency. It can automate steps. It can help make the customer experience better. But none of the technology matters if you don't hire right, you don't train to some degree of proficiency, you don't have capable reps. Technology, unless you're a pure online marketplace, you got to have the people.
100%. And that's probably a great place to wrap up this conversation. When you think about your career, who would you point to as the best sales leader and or the best sales enablement leader you've ever worked for, and why? And what did you learn?
Yeah, now I'm on my second time reporting to my current boss. I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to say names or not, but
up to you.
Yeah, well, I'll just say my current boss. And it's a woman, and I have 2 daughters, and she's a great role model for a successful woman in a technology company. I admire her for that. I admire her for what a great champion she is for important causes. Sales enablement isn't inherently at the desk. I'm not at the table of the CEO with the strong voice as other functions like IT. IT always the CMO. You've got all these other functions that have earned a spot at the CEO's table.
Sure.
Sales enablement isn't quite there. So you have to have a champion that can really advocate for you. And she does that extremely well. She's also a great sales leader. It's tough to find the balance between being really good at leading a large set of sales channels as well as leading sales enablement for the benefit of the whole company. And so she's a great champion in that respect as well.
Fantastic. And it sounds like you just set the bar for what the future of sales enablement looks like, which is a seat at the CEO's table.
Absolutely. And I just heard a phrase yesterday, Chief Productivity Officer. So that's my personal goal. I want to be the CPO.
Fantastic. That we look forward to watching your meteoric rise to the CPO position. So, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great Dreamforce, and happy selling.
Thank you.
You've been listening to a new show here on the Funnel Radio Network called Predictable Revenue Radio. It's a bi-weekly program brought to you by the good folks at Altify.